This is Mike Famill with Dread Central, and our guest today is Mr. John Massari. John Massari is a composer that you might know from the Wonderful World of Disney theme, the theme for the HBO series The Bradbury Theater, as well as Celebrity Ghost Stories, Hoarders, 24 Conspiracy, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, my personal favorite movie of all time, The Wizard of Speed and Time, and the very recently announced the return of Killer Clowns from Outer Space in 3D. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. You're calling me, and we're having this conversation from the Disney lot. And all I can say is that this is where I'm at today. And if you're ever here at lunchtime, this is the best place to get Walt's chili.
Is that the casting building behind you, or is that the commissary?
Actually, no, that's not the commissary. That is the actual headquarters, Team Disney,
Oh, all right.
where all the that's where all the big decisions are made.
What are you doing on the lot today?
Well, let's just put it this way. This is where I'm at today.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Um, so, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what sparked your interest in composing music?
Well, what sparked my interest in composing music, it started when I was a little boy. I had seen a triple feature at my local theater in Garden Grove, California. It was the Time Machine, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and and something else. It was like Ma and Pa Kettle. It was some old studio reel from Paramount, but old comedy series. But when I was just the Journey to the Center of the Earth and the Time Machine just captivated me in ways that I didn't understand when I was a kid. And my mother had just gotten a piano, and she was learning how to play piano, and I was just banging away at the piano trying to recreate what I heard because I didn't realize that it was the music that had affected me. So soon after that, I started taking piano lessons, and I was always trying to discover that kind of music that you hear in movies. I was always tinkering. I didn't know what I was doing. I just kept tinkering away, and that developed into a career. Basically, I kept up with it throughout my throughout my grade school, and then when I was in junior high school, I joined bands. I learned how to play the trumpet, the contrabass, the French horn. In high school, I played in what we would call garage bands. We were playing like heavy metal thrash music when it was called hard rock and acid rock at the time. And uh, so I had all those influences with me. And at the same time, I liked Burt Bacharach. That's not my car being towed, by the way. I used to like Burt Bacharach, loved Isaac Hayes, R&B. There's all sorts of. I exposed myself to all sorts of music. I loved classical music, even what would be considered modern classical music. When I was in my teens, I was listening to Stravinsky, Ravel, Debussy, uh, Witold Luloslavsky, and so all that kind of it kind of like melts into you. And so when then you start taking it upon yourself to compose music, all of a sudden you have this repertory that you've experienced and played that you apply to your own original music.
So, exposure is probably the best thing to have in your
Yeah.
background to be a composer.
Yes, yes. And I remember it wasn't, oddly enough, it wasn't till my late teens, I was like 19, where I discovered Dmitri Shostakovich and Sergei Prokofiev, which really inspired me, and to the point where I would take summers off and transcribe their scores into a piano reduction and sit there and like tinker around and figure out how they did their melodies, how they developed their transitions, and what have you. So, yeah, it is. There's a saying that you have to um, get like 10,000 hours of application to to any given field before you can become an expert. And that's unknowingly that's what I was doing. I had heard stories of how Stravinsky studied his music and how he got to his level of expertise along with everyone else, and it's like use that as a model, as a guide. So these people kind of mentor you in a way from history.
It's interesting when you say when you're decomposed or when you're deconstructing the music to learn
Hmm.
about it. I know a lot of writers that do that too. Hunter S.
Hmm.
Thompson used to write or used to type out The Great Gatsby over and over again to get used to how F. Scott Fitzgerald would write. So it's interesting that both writers and composers do that.
Exactly, exactly, and it came with just about anything in that. When I discovered that I would have to perhaps conduct my own music, I just back in the day I used to rent VHS tapes of Toscanini conducting and just see how he would do how he would approach a piece of music from a conductor standpoint. Also, I love to go to rehearsals. I used to go to the LA County, excuse me, the LA Phil rehearsals. There was Andre Previn, there was Carla Maria Giulini, there was uh, uh, oh my goodness, his name's escaping my memory right now. Um, he was oh anyways, the point is that you would see these composers and how they would rehearse and conduct and how they would communicate with the orchestra. And in this way, for instance, as a Pekka Solonen, who was for a good 10 or 12 years with the LA Phil, had a very, very specific style in the way he rehearsed and the way he conducted. And you just like observe that and take away from it what will benefit you, you know. But you have to seek this stuff. You have to seek this out. No one's going to tell you to do it. You know, when I was a kid and I played Little League Baseball, I used to watch professional baseball. And I used to watch how they walked out on the field, how they held the bat, how they would warm up, how they would get their mitt, how they would get their hands, you know, dried up. To, you know, you do that to basically every profession. So that's what I was doing at the time to prepare myself, you know, for what I do today.
Did you actively seek out any mentorship?
Yeah, yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was at UCLA, there was a music seminar class in which I met a orchestrator. His name is Dr. Albert Harris. He's no longer with us, but at the time he had a quite a career. He was music director for NBC Radio, and he was a conductor and orchestrator. He worked for many composers, you know, when I was growing up, and I would see him every week for about 2 years. And there was at one point he said, you know, let me introduce you to someone. I'm going to introduce you. I tell you what, I'm going to make a call for you to Jerry Fielding and David Rose. Give two of them a call. And as we know, David Rose, he did Little House on the Prairie, amongst many other things. And Jerry Fielding, he worked quite a bit with Clint Eastwood. And so I basically, you know, had an introduction. And when I made a phone call to both of these composers, you know, I had already had the go ahead. So I worked with both of them on a very small level at first, and then it got a little bit more involved to the point where I now can go on my own. I can now seek my own projects, you know. So, and that 2 years of working with those two different composers was I think I learned more than I would have in any seminar class or any kind of college class that I had, because you were dealing with product that had to be produced and had to be broadcasted within days. So your learning curve and your skill set level has to roll with the punches, or literally you don't work. They'll go to the next person. You just have to learn how to survive.
So the working experience and the do or die kind of attitude of the entertainment industry is much more productive than any class you could take.
Yes, I mean, I'm not saying not to take classes,
Mm-hmm.
but once you get in there, once you get thrown into the water, thrown into the fire, so to speak, you'd be amazed how much inspiration you can come up to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what you would do to survive. You learn how to organize your day more intelligently. You learn how to not answer the phone, how not to have certain people around you that can distract you,
Yeah, I know.
because
I know that from being in here.
that's a constant. I mean, not everyone understands the level of concentration, the level of dedication that it takes to do many professions,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes you could come off as a very aloof person, but you know you can't when you don't have something ready to go for, in the professional field, they're not going to ask you why, and you say, well, my mom needed me to move furniture for her this weekend, and so I couldn't do it. They're just not going to understand that. What do you mean? You didn't hire a moving company for her so that you can do our project? That's what you have to think. You have to, Mom, I'm hiring you a moving company. I have to work. So it's so basically, yeah. Once you get thrown into the fire, you learn how to swim. Ray Bradbury had a really great saying. He says, jump off the cliff. You can grow your wings on the way down.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing that from him in college, and it really stuck with me. And I'm not saying not be prepared, but don't be afraid to take a risk.
Hmm.
Some people can't handle it on a real gut level. And it's not easy. It's not for everyone. Not everyone can do this sort of thing and survive and persist.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I would say definitely, you know, getting yourself involved in real tough situations, you can learn quite a bit.
Yeah, that applies to everything. I mean, this isn't the only thing I do, and in
Mm-hmm.
my other job, I just had to take that leap to see if I could do it, or else I would have been stuck doing the same thing I'd been doing for 10 years prior. It was
And
scary,
congrat-
but it's something you have to do professionally, regardless of your profession. You have to take a risk at some point,
yeah,
or else you're
and
just going to get stagnant.
good for you.
Oh,
Good for you.
thank you. So when you are composing a score, what is your habit or method of getting that whole process kicked off?
That's a secret, and
I
I won't tell.
understand.
No, it's very simple. Actually, it's a very simple concept. Sometimes I call it getting religion,
Hmm.
where first of all you have to believe in what you're doing. You can't like do something halfway.
Hmm.
And anytime I have gotten myself involved in something that it's the music and everything about the project is committed to death, it's really not fun to watch when it's done. It's like watching a car that was like, it doesn't really work right. It moves, but it's not really correct. So basically, it's having faith in the people you're working with, faith in the story, and believing it. And once you believe the story you're working on, and you trust and believe the people you're working with, then all of a sudden the inspiration comes. That's I know that sounds like a very emotional sort of thing, but music is very emotional.
Hmm.
So basically, my task at that point, when I get religion, I love, I have faith in the project, and I love it. It's basically sitting down for days, just coming up with musical material. Sometimes I jot it down. Sometimes I sequence it into my computer. Sometimes I completely go out of my comfort zone and I just start pulling up sounds of, like, let's say odd kinds of brass sounds, odd kinds of woodwind sounds, and I start playing and experimenting with different sounds. I go, and those sounds will kick off musical ideas. Um, or sometimes I will take, my cell phone with me and stick the recorder on, and if all of a sudden out of nowhere a melody comes to my mind, or a musical idea, I
Hmm.
can like sing it or jot it or describe what I want to do. So I go through a period of searching those days. And I have a stack, like, you can't see this, a stack of music that anytime I had an idea, I would just sit there and jot it down. Sometimes I flip through that, and I'll flip through it for many hours, and I'll see something, and there's like 5 notes. My goodness. Oh, if I put that backwards, it's even better, you know. So you always have a palette of something that I can draw on besides something new. And these new ideas that I'm describing to you about, that will go into this. Of course I'll label it what it's for, and I date everything because it used to be really frustrating. I go, when in the world did I write that thing? But if I see, like, you know, January, 2006, I go, oh, I know what was going on at that time.
Hmm.
It's kind of get reference. So that's basically what I do. I hunt and search for material, themes and what have you. And then it's at that point I will pick a specific scene. Usually by this time, by the way, I got to say, if I've auditioned for the movie and got the job, so to speak, or was awarded the account, I picked a very crucial scene to compose to. But if I haven't gotten, if they, sometimes on my last project, I just finished a virtual reality feature film that's going to be out for Easter, and they literally just hired me because they like my music, they love my music, and so I had to find a scene that, because you have to make the people you're working with feel comfortable, that they
Hmm.
have to have a relief, because they've been going like a year in development, a year in shooting, and several months in editing, and now they're going to get another layer of creativity. So I pick a crucial scene, work on, just pour my heart into that and work that. I go, guys, here is this crucial scene, the one is that is their keystone moment, basically, or something of that nature. And once they see it and they like it and approve of it, oh, they're at a place of peace and contentment, and moving on from that point is a bit easier.
Hmm.
And I had a very interesting. I'll tell you what the movie is. It's the story of Jesus Christ in virtual reality,
Huh.
uh, and it's. I can't describe it to you, but there are some awesome experiences in the movie, and I will tell you there was. I could just tell you basically what it is. I'm not going to go into great description, but I did the baptism scene
Hmm.
of Christ being baptized by John the Baptist, and I read up on history and how the world was at that time and what people were afraid of. And I took it from that. So I had this very visceral, thick, emotional piece going on that resolved in certain places. And I just loved it. And I didn't hear from them for one day. I didn't hear from them the second day and the third day. And on the fourth day, I got a conference call, not from one person, but from five people. One person is the designated speaker. And they asked me, we listen to music. It's awesome. It's really powerful. Was this for the baptism scene? And I'd say, well, yeah, well, of course. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, because we put it up against the crucifixion and it works perfect. We thought maybe somehow you missed it. And I said, can I can I call you back? Let me try that. And for crying out loud, it worked. They were right, and it was hitting cues like if it was specifically composed for it. So I called them back and I said, okay, so I get your point. Yeah, we can put. Let's do that. I'm actually, it's moving me. It's giving me goosebumps, even though not from. It's giving me goosebumps in that it's working for the film.
Hmm.
It's making the movie work. Um, let's talk about baptism again. What we're looking at. So they had like a description of what they were looking for, of what they want to accomplish. And so it was at that point I took a sheet of music and I tore it off the pad and I said, guys, I'm starting all over again, going back to the drawing board on this one. And the next thing that I did, I followed they just had an emotional description of what they wanted it to achieve. And I did that and they loved it. So it's a process. It's a process by which it's a collaborative process. You have to work with the people you're working with. You have to rely on, you're working on their movie. So I mean, there have been times where I've had directors come in and I've been like on the third floor of a building and they want to throw themselves out because, as far as they're concerned, their movie is absolute garbage. It doesn't work for them because they haven't heard it with music, they haven't heard it with sound effects. They're just in the process of cutting it together. And I said, you know what, let me play with it for a few days. And sometimes I'll rush and put temp music, like some of my music. I go, look at this. What do you think about the scene now? And they go, oh my God, it looks like a movie now. So so that's a very important process of getting. I use the term religion. Get really falling in love with what you're working on and the people you're working with is very important. Which is what happened with the Kyoto brothers. The minute I met the Kyoto brothers, I thought these guys would have lived down the block from me, and we'd be building model airplanes and blowing them up. After we finished playing, you know what I'm saying? There was some kind of connection we had, and I knew what they were going for.
Hmm.
I knew where they came from a filmmaker's perspective, and from a movie fan perspective, I knew where they were coming from. So that addresses that question of yours, what's the process? The process is really getting to know the people you're working with and having a connection with them.
What are some of the hardest projects that you've had to compose a score for?
Well, what would make a project very hard is when you have factions. So it goes to politics. When you
Hmm.
have factions, the producer doesn't agree with the director, and the producer, there may not be one producer, maybe two or three producers, and they'll have some sort of creative say, and everyone has a different idea. So you have maybe anywhere between 2 to 4 different ideas of how anything should be approached. And sometimes I've walked in on projects just to get it to the stage where they're ready for post-production sound and music was a monumental task. Many battles had been fought. Much blood had been shed. Now there is another creative thing. And it's not only with music, it's with sound design, it's with sound effects. Who's going to do voiceovers, and who's going to be who's going to be the voice of this character, the voice of that character, and all that. And it's just battle after. Those are the toughest because you don't know what you have. 1 out of 4 chances. You may please one person number one, person four doesn't like it. These two are on the fence about it, and maybe a fifth person has some ideas of how to fix it, and then it becomes it just so at some point you have to someone has to be assigned as the person that's we're going to define everything, and that is when, and I bite my tongue, that is when I pull out the temp tracks,
Hmm.
because I want to live a long time. I want to live very old. I mean, Giuseppe Verdi lived a very long, illustrious life. I want to be like him and still be writing music. So what I do is I'll take out my music or music from other movies, and I'll do 3 or 4 different versions of scenes, and they say, you know what, that version works, and they'll all agree on something. So you go through that process, which may take a couple of weeks to do, and then everyone's agreed on it, and then you model your score on what they've done. Otherwise, you're gonna run out of money producing everything, uh, not to mention the heartache involved.
When you come up against those kind of situations where you're dealing with politics versus creativity, does creativity usually win, or do the politics win?
It's a combination. And I
Really?
always have food for them when they're coming to see me.
Just to grease the wheels a little bit, huh?
I find out what's their favorite food or snacks, and I make sure I have that. And there was a time where I was working with people. It was something of a drinking crowd, and I knew they liked single malt Scotch, so I got a collection of single malt Scotch with a sign out sheet next to everything. And what's the sign out sheet for? It's just so I have proof. So my family doesn't think that I'm dusting this stuff off. I can say, see, at this time and this date, that guy took a shot. So yeah, so in those kind of situations, it's nice. It's nice to play up to people's comfort zones.
When you're auditioning or whatever they really consider it, are you
Audition, yeah.
do they usually just look at the music, or are they sometimes looking at you too as a composer for your attitude and your work ethic?
Oh yeah, it all works in together.
Okay.
It all works together. I mean, and there are composers that it doesn't matter what their personality is. It's their pedigree is what the company is looking for. But often, yeah, personality plays in, skill, personality. It's all a symphony of factors that can work in your favor.
Okay. I know it might be a little bit early to talk about this, but can you tell us anything about the upcoming Killer Clown sequel?
Of course not. But I can tell you this. But I can tell you this: there is a lot of enthusiasm from fans and some people in the industry. Um, there are many YouTubers, movie reviewers that review it to this day. As I'm going to do a review about Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I saw this when I was 8 years old, and they give their experience. And this person's now in their 20s. I know people that come up to me and send me fan mail that they said, "I'm just introducing my 3-year-old." I my nieces and nephews when they were younger, they said, Uncle Johnny, dude, can we watch this movie? Is it too scary? I go, well, you watched Aliens last week, right? Yeah, okay. Well, Killer Clowns from Outer Space is not. I don't think to me it's not scary, but for you it might just be weird. But you might like that. It says, but still, we're really scared of clowns. So, um, anyways, so there, so that I can tell you, and there are efforts being made to have some sort of a reawakening of
Hmm.
clowns in some form, whether it's the TV series or a mini series on cable or another feature or another series of feature. We joke around and says, we have to make at least a trilogy of at least 5 films. And I said,
All in order or prequels then?
well, I don't know. I mean, I had several. I remember I had a conference call with the Kyoto brothers a while ago, and it wasn't like last week. It was a while ago, and I had some ideas that I think still are on the drawing board. I mean, they were just my ideas. I mean, it was my inspiration because I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, what planet do they come from? Or is it a planet? Is it a planetoid around a larger planet? Were they given their? I can talk for hours about all the scenarios. Are they just animals that are intelligent enough? They were trained to use all this equipment, and the intelligence that developed it, they they evolved beyond flesh and blood, and they're just tooling around the universe doing what they do, all sorts of things. Is there a culture on their planet? Like maybe there's a circus culture. Maybe the higher sentient beings are kind of like the circus partners and circus managers, and they're part of, there's this weird, odd hierarchy, unrealistic hierarchy. So, but that's all conjecture,
Hmm.
right? That's not part of a script. That's all conjecture. But as far as actually applying for it, all I can say is that there are efforts are being made,
Hmm.
and people are definitely interested in doing something because I think we've played out vampires, werewolves, zombies are coming due pretty soon. At some point, we got to go to something else.
That's a common thread I hear from a lot of fans is they're kind of zombied out.
Yeah, although I have seen some zombie movies, indie zombie movies that really surprise me
Hmm.
because I think they deal with factors of society that we take for granted, like reading,
Hmm.
like knowing how to read, uh, knowing language and communication, and it's just like in the worlds they've created, no one knows. There's like 2 people that know how to read. Something like, I mean, that's been done before in Fahrenheit 4051 and all sorts of in all sorts of novels and movies. But there have, I mean, I am not a huge fan of zombies, but give me a good story, even has zombies in it, it doesn't matter, you
Hmm.
know. But it's not just zombies, and it's like Killer Clowns too. It was silly, it was goofy, but as you know in the movie, they were saying, well, maybe our cultural understanding of clowns comes from aliens from outer space, and we never knew it until now. And now they're coming back. At least, you had something to hang your hat on in that sense.
Yeah. Kind of like ancient aliens and pyramids. It all came from somewhere else, kind of thing.
Right. God forbid someone figured out how to build a 10-story structure out of stone. That's impossible. But aliens had to do it. I know that because I used to do stone work with my grandfather. It's amazing the things you can do with leverage.
Yeah.
So,
How did you actually get involved with Kyoto Brothers for the original Killer Clowns film?
um, that's interesting because every every little credit on my IMDb has its own story. But basically, some years before that, there was an individual by the name of Eric Young that now is a professor at Chapman University, Dodge College of Music, excuse me, Dodge College of Film and Media. And he and I worked on a short subject film. But there's even a story before that, but I don't want to go that complicated. But anyways, we became friends, and he said, I have some pals of mine that are working on his oddball science fiction film. You may not be interested. It may be too weird for you. And when he described it, I go, when is the screening? I want to go. And so I went. There was a screening on the Warner Brothers lot with 100 people, and the Killer Clowns did not have any score whatsoever. Didn't have, barely had any sound effects, and it just had dialogue, minimal sound effects, minimal sound treatments, and all that. And actually, it was kind of frightening to see it in that way, and to try to figure out, oh gosh, what am I going to do? This is absolutely bizarre, and I loved it. Well, the screening started out with 100 people, and by the time the screening was over, there were 25 people left, and I didn't know it, but the whole time I was sitting next to Steve Chiodo, and I was chatting to him. I go, geez, this is like the most bizarre thing. I'm loving this, and so I didn't realize it. So, so that's how I met Steve Chiodo and the brothers later, and then what they did is after that they had made a decision on a few composers that they wanted to have score this film, and then they said, you know what, this is so crazy, let's open it up and have a blind test. So myself and probably a good like 7 or 8 other composers picked scenes, and we composed to them. I put mine on a VHS cassette, and I sent it in. Like 2 weeks later, I got a call that says, okay, you're the one, and the reason why you're the one is you have to know this because we want you to be consistent with what you've done through the whole film. This is Steve telling me this. This is the Chiodo brothers telling me this in a meeting, and the music director of the company. His name is Bob Hunka, very brilliant man. He worked for Sony Pictures for quite a few years after that. And they said, you took it, you didn't take this movie like a joke. You took it seriously. Even though you recorded it with synthesizers and everything, the music is serious, and we want to keep that through the whole movie, because that's like the straight man, so to speak. Because if the music was goofy, it's gonna like make the movie look a little stupid. We want to maintain a core sci-fi horror feel for the whole movie. So that's basically how that went, and it's been a love affair ever since.
So when you've got something that's so bizarre as Killer Clowns, how do
Hmm.
you score that so you can make it serious? That
Well,
seems like a real process to get that right.
you treat it. You don't have to look at it as clowns per se. You can look at it as like two people. I looked at it like it was Journey to the Center of the Earth. Once they went into the clown tent, I was thinking, I go, well, that's Mount Snuffles, and the Göteborg expedition was going to go into um, that dead volcano and go to the center of the earth. Let's treat it like that. Let's treat it seriously. They're going into something serious, and then of course every once in a while there is a little bit of what I like to call Soviet circus music,
Hmm.
which comes from my Shostakovich influence, that will get me through the circusy sort of thing. For instance, when there's a famous scene in Reel 7, by the way, everybody, Reel 7 in a 10-reel movie, which each reel is about 20 minutes long, Reel 7 is your tough reel. That's where the story has to take a turn. This is from all aspects of filmmaking. You have to take a turn. You can't lose your audience in Reel 7. You have to boost them. So in Reel 7, there's the clowns that are vacuuming up everyone at the town, right, and making cotton candy balls. So how did I treat that? Very simply, I treated it as if I was doing a scene where Nazi tanks were rolling into Poland. You had this very martial, fanfare-ish kind of thing going on, and you can almost imagine like little kids and families looking hopelessly,
Hmm.
as a mechanized army comes through their country. So that's kind of how I dealt with it, and it had a bit of a fantastic, bit of a carnival fantastic sort of thing going on with it at the same time, like a giant macabre waltz, so to
Hmm.
speak. So that's how you treat it. You just take something legitimate and juxtapose it up against it and see how it works. And that's where like a good music editor works well. They just won't pick something that hits the beats. They'll pick something emotionally that's going to sometimes either play with or against the picture in such a way that it's going to mean something to the audience.
So basically, we need to feel what the people in the movie are actually feeling instead of what we're seeing. That's
Yeah,
kind of the
I
emotional attachment we're trying to get.
I mean, I will confess, I heard some of the submissions for that particular scene, and they were just very quiet and tingly, and there's no impact to it.
Hmm.
And like I said, Reel 7, that's where you have to wake everyone up again. Hopefully they're not asleep, but definitely you want to wake them up. And I think we've been keeping people's interest with that movie for quite a few years now.
Hmm. With the premise of it, you think it would have been just kind of like it's a product of its time and it's over. But I've never seen anyone not interested in it. Even when I saw the Kyoto Brothers a few years ago, people were coming up to their booth and looking at the props, just amazed by it.
Oh yeah, they love that. And MGM has been so awesome with their merchandising. I mean, my goodness, you can get a great clown costume. There's a hoodie. There's like almost something like a crew jacket. I wish there was a nice black leather jacket that they would make. I think there's a Converse type shoe line
Hmm.
with it really has the art well um, well represented on the product. And it's just amazing. There's more. There's things that I'm not even aware of. I know there's clothing, there's costumes, there's you can even buy little props from
Hmm.
the movie, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I got my eye on a hoodie that I have because I'm a hoodie fan.
That really speaks to something about the impact of the film that it's got the same kind of staying power and merchandise line that even Ghostbusters has, that Ghostbusters
Yes,
managed to keep.
yes, and it's awesome is the Dickies that did the opening theme song. Those guys are still vibrant, great, awesome musicians. They perform live all the time. They're on a world tour. I think every year they take the summer off and tour the world. I think they're in Europe now, if I'm not mistaken. But they had toured the U.S. and they started in Australia. They toured the U.S. Now they're in Europe, and they're just fantastic musicians. I just love Stan Lee, their lead guitarist, is just an awesome guy. I mean, that guitar solo that's in the Killer Clowns theme song is just absolutely magnificent. And what I'm looking forward to is getting back into the studio with them and doing another performance of it because we're going to be re-realizing the score with an orchestra.
Hmm.
I'm very fans are really looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But and I'm trying to hint at them to maybe come up with a song that's going to have something to do with the sequel, maybe something about the dark side of the moon or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But no, I really love their music. I've seen them perform live. They're really awesome musicians. They really bring it. They really do bring it, and I think their staying power is a testament to that.
Speaking of composing and staying power and the changes that are made over the years with your profession, how
Mhm.
has technology impacted that? Has it made it easier, better, quicker?
Well, it's interesting. You asked me a question, and it's like I have a story.
It's all right.
It's
I
like
mean,
my daughters will ask me a question. I go, well, that reminds me when, and they go, oh my God, Dad. Well, I'll be very simple. I met a fellow by the name, I believe his name is Joe Williams. He's a director. He retired on the second season of when I met him several years ago. He was 94. Very sweet man. He had retired the second season of the original Twilight Zone, and he had directed one of the first movies for Warner Brothers that Marilyn Monroe was an actress. It was her first acting role in a feature for Warner Brothers Pictures. It was called, I want to say it was called The Love Nest. That's what it was. It was like a sitcom. It was like Neighbors. Not Neighbors. It was like Friends.
mhm.
Basically, it was an apartment building where everyone knew each other, and there was all kinds of. It was a really funny, wonderful film. I asked him. I said, Mr. Williams, I usually like start my day at 6 in the morning, and somehow it doesn't seem to end until 10, even with all the great tools we have. What was it like in your day? And he goes, basically, it was the same. We would start out shooting at 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, which means you had to get up at 3. And if you were done at 9:30 or 10, that was an early day. He just said something very simple. This bit, creating product in this business takes time. So even with all the great tools that I have, there's that many more possibilities that you can explore. Are certain things easier? Oh, you bet you. I mean, I remember um, I remember editing on instructive editing with tape and film mag. And if I was editing on a Moviola where you have to transfer your audio onto film audio, with the sprocket holes and everything, you had to do like 4 or 5 different passes, because if you made a mistake, you had to go to another copy to insert that era. When you wanted to do a fade, I would actually take toluene and a rag and wipe off the magnetic strip for like 2 feet to get the right kind of like merging fade, right? Well, this would take 10 minutes. Now it's 2 clicks.
Hmm.
Literally, not even a split second, it's done, and you can hear it immediately. You don't have to thread it back into a machine. Oh my goodness, are we still in sync? Let me check. Where's my last sync pop? Oh my goodness. I love digital medium. I love non-destructive digital mediums. I have utilized it compositionally in distorting sounds and stretching sounds, putting things backwards. Sometimes I'll play something like maybe on a keyboard or a bass guitar or something like that, and I'll like it, but it's not right, and I'll literally start moving the beats around, and I go, oh my God, that sounds so weird. I'm going to use that. You know what I'm saying? Whereas back in the day, that wasn't possible. I mean, it was probably would be, but it's very. If you've ever edited on reel-to-reel audio tape and kind of like listen for where the breaks are and cut and use a no, it's a. I was talking to Mick Garris. He does not miss the days of editing on a Moviola. We were at some signing. I go, Chris, okay, tell me honest truth. Do you miss editing with a Moviola? And he goes, oh, absolutely not. The minute they came up with, Final Cut and all the digital, I was there. I loved it. So there you go. Technology is wonderful, and what I love is that it always develops and it changes, and it gives you another. I like to tinker with things. So if someone has a new thing to tinker with, I like tinkering with it. So that's my opinion.
I've heard from some audiophiles that old reel to reel or analog has a little bit crisper sound than digital. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, in some cases, depending what you're talking about, there are some recordings. Now you got to keep in mind, analog tape runs against a magnetic head, and if you keep running it enough times, you're going to wear it out,
Hmm.
right? So there are recordings that I've heard of. I know specifically Alban Berg with the New York Philharmonic. It was recorded on 3-channel uh, film mag, and it was basically wonderfully mic'd, incredibly performed. They did one recording, or maybe 1 or 2 takes of the piece. I'm not sure what piece they did of his, but they also did it. Also, Leonard Bernstein did it for the Mahler Symphony cycle that he did, and they basically recorded 1 or 2 takes, figured out which one they liked, mastered that um, onto a record, and it was done. And the repros of those in CD sound like it was recorded last week. They're absolutely stunning because the tapes have preserved well. They weren't run back and forth. They weren't over processed. So absolutely, you can make an argument for that. But if you were to say to me, says we're going to do this all analog, I'd say no, 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 no. We are not. We are not. The tape cost alone scares some producers. I go, well, let me tell you, I do from time to time take my mixes and run them through a board. Like if I've recorded everything direct, well, even when if you're recording an orchestra, you're going to be recording through microphone preamps. You're going to be recording through a particular board of whatever. It could be a Neve console, an SSL. It could be a Harrison board. Who knows what it could be? It's going to have all characteristics that are going to be digitally, preserved. And I wouldn't mess with it from that point on. I wouldn't say, okay, well, I want to run it through a Neve console now, unless I had to for some reason. But things that I have recorded myself, my microphone right into my computer, I have taken and mixed like on a Neve console, run
Hmm.
everything through there, and balance it out and have that nice little bit of velvetiness that you get with a board. But as far as going strictly analog with analog tape, you know, maybe if we're recording a live performance of an orchestra, well rehearsed and everything, maybe that might be fun.
Hmm.
But in an industrial situation where you have to do edits, recuts, move things back, jog things, correct beats and things like that, no, no, thank you. It's you have to put me in a straight jacket.
Um, as far as the projects that you've already done, what is your dream project that you'd like to come along?
Oh, I would love to do a western.
Well, they are kind of coming back in style.
Yeah, I would love to do a western, but I would love to do a western, not necessarily so I can do my version of Aaron Copland or my version of Elmer Bernstein, but I want to do my version of Americana.
Hmm.
You know, so that would be kind of a dream project. And I gotta say, I kind of just finished my dream project, the Jesus Christ in virtual reality. I was really hoping to do a project not necessarily for its religious content, but something that many people throughout the world will enjoy, and I can communicate my music with them, whether they're believers or not.
Hmm.
That's hold on a second. I'm going to go into low power mode. So I'm starting to run out of power.
Okay.
But anyway, but go ahead.
Let's see. Uh, for those that are looking to get into the entertainment industry, what advice do you have?
Well, to thine own self be true. You got to be true to yourself. You don't want to go into any business being like someone else. Now, admiring someone else's career and their career moves and everything, that's very, very important. But, being yourself, being honest with yourself, you will be very successful because people will appreciate that.
Hmm.
Uh, that's at a core level. You can apply that to basically everything because you can't please everybody. You have to be able to understand that you do your best and um, and then some, and I'm I'm guilty of this all the time, of doing things until it's absolutely perfect. So I know that, let's say if I get passed on something, I can say, you know what, I gave it my best. I gave him every possibility, and it's not personal, it's business. Sometimes it does happen. We all have victories, we all have failures. So it's always important to keep that in perspective. But I would say seek out people that know more than you, hang around people that are better than you in many different ways with your talent. Maybe they're better in their business, the way they handle their business, the way they handle their business contacts, the way they handle their career. You want to be familiar with those people because you always want to move up the ladder, because if you have to like come down to other people's levels, you're just going to be dragging yourself down.
Hmm.
Everyone talks about this. Snoop Dogg talks about it, where he sees someone's talented, and he's trying to get them to come to his level, and they're stubborn because they're really comfortable at the level they're working with, but he can't work with them anymore.
Hmm.
And that happens a lot. I mean, I must say that I have very few people that work for me because I want people to work as hard as I work. And I don't hire people because they have the right gear, or 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 they hang around, they dress cool or anything like that. They just have to have a passion for music and a passion for making the music sound musical and communicating. So I would also say to someone starting out in the business, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to ask for help, learning help, because you're not going to know everything. I don't know everything. There are people that I ask questions to, and it drives them crazy, but these people are experts at what they do. I mean, I do a lot of my own sound mixing and editing and what have you. I don't know everything about it, so I go to an expert. I ask, how should I do this? What's the best way to do this? I'm getting this result and it's not working. What am I doing wrong? And no one likes an insufferable know-it-all. you know, and that way you gain bonds with people. And there are people that come ask me for advice, about what I know how to do, and so that, and it's I'm going to get a lot of criticism for this, but you don't necessarily have to go to college. But if that's important to you, certainly go for it. But you should also study privately. You should also that's very important, and you should take risks and do things on your own.